You need to know that as a non-commissioned officer, you have tremendous authority, and there is nothing in regulatory guidance that has diminished the authority and responsibility of the non-commissioned officer. Absolutely failed in living and upholding the duties and responsibilities of the non-commissioned officer. And once you do that, man, it is game over for you until somebody gets in your business. That soldier said, you know what, fuck you, man, I ain't doing it. I dare you. I dare you. See this thing? There's still more in there. What do you think all these things are? Team, we're talking about TC 7-22.7. The duties and responsibilities of the non-commissioned officer, or otherwise known as the non-commissioned officer guide. And I want to run through a few typically standard type board questions, as well as do a little bit more of a deep dive into this regulation so that you have more knowledge for your kit bag as you continue to learn and grow into those duties and responsibilities. As we get this going, make sure you leave some comments down below about questions or concerns that you may have about this or any other regulations so that we can continue to master our craft. So the first question I have for you is, what are the basic responsibilities of the non-commissioned officer? So we're talking about discipline, property, training, welfare, and execution of the mission. Those are the basic things that all NCOs are charged with getting done. Now, as we go about getting after this, we have different types of power that we can use, and there are 5 types of power that the non-commissioned officer has. What are they? So we're talking about legal, and I'll list them off first, and then we'll kind of explain them. So legal, reward, coercive, reverent, and expert. So legal power is basically the power that you have as an NCO as derived by articles and regulations, beginning all the way, with from the top all the way down to the bottom with your unit SOP. So specifically, we're thinking about things like ADP 1, we're thinking about, of course, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We're thinking about 6-22, 600-20, right? Command policy. These are all things that directly give the non-commissioned officer power to do those basic responsibilities that we talked about. The next one is reward power. So this is a way that leaders execute or demonstrate power, and it's a, I don't want to say it's a quid pro quo, but it's basically, if you do this, then I will do that. And you see it all the time. And most of the time, it's not necessarily a if you do this, but it's because you did X, I'm going to do Y. And maybe that Y is a verbal praising. Maybe it's a positive counseling. Maybe it's a day off. Maybe it's a recommendation for an award, things of this nature, right? Next up, we have coercive. So coercive power is basically that which says, I am telling you to do this, get it done. And it can come across in any number of ways, but it basically says, it's like sandpaper, right? I'm going to rub my sandpaper on you until you get this job done. So, little boot to ass. Next up, we have referent or reverent type power, and this is where subordinates have a respect for that leader. So maybe you have a leader who is more transformational or transactional, if you will. And by nature or by virtue of that leader's presence, the subordinates want to accomplish the mission that the leader is putting out, if that makes sense. And then last is expert, and this is where you have, whether it's through institutional knowledge, whether it's through operational knowledge, you have become a master of your craft. It could be technically related, but it doesn't have to be, right? You are looked at as an expert in your field, and you use this and say, because I have done this in the past, I am telling you this is what we need to do, and this is how we need to do it. And in turn, folks pay attention and they listen to you. So what is sergeant's business? Right? What is the business of sergeants? and that is to train and lead soldiers, right? As you're going through and you're thinking about how to frame some of your answers to a board member, think about a couple things. One, how can I maintain control of the conversation, right? Because remember, the panel of board members assembled because you are present, not the other way around. And so it is really easy to sometimes lose control of this conversation, which is really, it's kind of a job interview, if you will, right? And so you want to be able to maintain control, and you can do that by demonstrating your confidence in yourself and in the subject knowledge that we're talking about, or that is being asked of you. So you need to make sure that you're studying your focus areas that you have for your particular board, and don't just study in your head, but say words out loud. You can always do things like rephrase a question in your answer, or restate a question in your answer. For example, the business of sergeants is to train and lead soldiers. And then, obviously direct that particular question to who you're talking to, whether it's a first sergeant or the CSM or whatever, right? If you don't quite understand the question that's being asked, you can ask that board member to restate the question. That is option number one. Option number two is to ask them to rephrase the question. Now, and that's going to be received differently by every single board member. I will often restate a question, if especially if things were shotgun styles, moving a little bit fast or something of this nature. But most times I won't rephrase the question because I know it's going on. So, simple question: what is a sergeant? And a simple question like that is something that you weren't quite prepared for it, you weren't quite expecting it, so you're not sure what somebody is looking for. So you get to ask. That'd be a fine question to say. First sergeant, could you rephrase your question? In which case, the first sergeant's going to say, "What is a sergeant?" But ultimately, I think sometimes our difficulty in answering simple questions like this is because we're overthinking the questions. And it's okay to give an answer like, first sergeant, a sergeant is a leader. That is actually the answer to the question. But if a board member was looking for something more, then you may get a follow-on question, and that's okay. It's not a problem to get follow-on questions because board members are just trying to understand and gauge your knowledge of a particular area. Explain the chain of command. So the chain of command is the succession of commander superior to subordinates through which command is exercised. And a lot of times you may be asked, to describe or to name your chain of command. And you may be asked to do that from first to last, right? So you're talking about who is the first person in a soldier's chain of command. And the very first person is that squad leader. It's that first line NCO. After that, it's going to be a platoon leader, and then company commander, battalion commander, brigade commander, division commander, all the way up to the President of the United States. But that first NCO is the only NCO who is in that soldier's chain of command, as well as their NCO support channel, right? So that's a little caveat for you. Now, you should know, and the perfect time to do this is when you're on, sitting on CQ or you're a runner or something, and you have a wall of photos. Snap a picture of the entire wall, so that way when you're not there, that you can study it. Know the names, know the faces, know their titles, and what positions they hold at what level. Because you may have a board leader, the president of the board, just hold you up a photograph and say, I got told to call this person. Who am I calling? Right? And then you have to be able to have some facial recognition. Or you may be asked, hey, I've been told to call our division commander. Who is that? So questions could be asked any number of ways. So make sure that you know those people. The same for your NCO support channel, right? You're in a board made up by a panel of NCOs. You should dadgum know your NCO support channel. Again, starting at the bottom, that first line NCO, all the way up to the top. Scribe down here. Define responsibility. So responsibility is ultimately being held accountable for our actions and our inactions, right? Being held responsible is another word for responsibility is accountability. So you could just, if you couldn't think of that word accountability, you could think of another word that you can say with confidence that is a synonym that means the same thing as responsibility. How does the chain of command support the NCO support channel? And the answer to this is by legally holding people accountable who challenge a sergeant's authority, right? That is what the NCO, that is what the chain of command does. They hold people accountable for anyone who would challenge a sergeant's authority. Now, team, I got to tell you, a little quick break here, before we finish up the last few questions here. You need to know that as a non-commissioned officer, you have tremendous authority. And there is nothing in regulatory guidance that has diminished the authority and responsibility of the non-commissioned officer. Not one regulation, not one article, not one code, not one field manual, not one TC has ever degraded the authority and the responsibility of the non-commissioned officer. What has done that are leaders like me who don't hold NCOs accountable for doing their job. And so I'm going to challenge and encourage you to stay strong as you are working to become and work into your role as an NCO, whether you're a junior NCO, you're a senior NCO. Learn to embrace it and learn to wear this armor that you have and to hold that shield and that sword as your backbone becomes stronger, right? A little example. I'm walking through the barracks, and the barracks is filled with probably 7 different units. It's a very large barracks, and so the charge of quarters, CQ, that's what that stands for, it rotates amongst all the people on this DA6, all these units. And so I'm walking through the barracks because that's part of my stinking job as an NCO. And I walk into a common latrine on the first floor. It's a Monday at probably 09. I'm getting ready to go to hold first formation of the day. Well, second formation of the day after PT. And I walk into this freaking latrine and I open it. And what do I see? It is not just filthy. There is freaking puke all over the latrine, all over the sink, all over the spot, everywhere. It's on the floor, it's on the mirror. Somebody just vomited their entire guts out of the entire weekend in this latrine. And none of it was wet. Like it was all dried and getting sticky and tacky and yucky. Yucky stuff. So of course I lost my freaking mind, right? So I went down to the charge quarters, and there happened to be quite a few people in the barracks, and I grabbed this NCO and I said, "You come with me." And I take him into this latrine and I show him this crap. I'm like, "What the hell is this?" He's like, "Well, I'm sorry for Sergeant. I'll get somebody to he said, "I will clean it right now." I was like, "Stop. I am not telling you that you are the one responsible to clean up this crap. You're an NCO. Your job is to supervise and to take ownership, right? It's the first general order that we have, to take charge of this post and all other government property within view. Why were you not touring this barracks and doing just that? And if you did see it, which you should have, why didn't you grab the first person, whether they did it or not, and say, you are going to get in there and clean up this crap? You failed as an NCO. Absolutely failed in living and upholding the duties and responsibilities of the non-commissioned officer. And once you did that, you created a climate, you created a standard that says that all of these soldiers don't have to listen to non-commissioned officers. And once you do that, man, it is game over for you until somebody gets in your business. So, man, take charge, because I'll tell you something else. And I know I'm on a little bit of a rant, but I dare, like, say this NCO, had a little backbone to him, and they found a soldier, and that soldier said, you know what, fuck you, man, I ain't doing it. I dare you to tell one of my NCOs that you are not going to execute a lawful and legal direction or order. I dare you. You see this thing? It's my little skull mug, and there's still more in there. What do you think all these things are? I mean, come on. I dare you. And I need NCOs. This is one of the things that I constantly told my NCOs. I said, you have got to know that I am going to push you. I'm going to hold you accountable. But you also have to know that you have no greater advocate than me. If you are right, I will move hell in order to make sure that right is done. Let's get on to the next question. Define duty. Duty is the legal or moral obligation to do our job, without being told to do it. Duty is also a Army value, and so you should know what the definition of duty is, as well as all the other Army values. What is the role of the command sergeant major? So the command sergeant major is the senior enlisted advisor to the battalion commander, and that's ultimately what every 7 is, right? Every senior NCO is, regardless of what position that they have. They are the senior enlisted advisor to that commander. Next up, when was the position of the sergeant major of the Army first established? This is July 4th, 1966. Is the command sergeant major in the chain of command? The answer is no, because we've already talked about this, but the command sergeant major does advise the commander and supervises the NCO support channel. There are 2 key elements of command. What are they? And that, of course, is authority and responsibility. What is the NCO support channel? And most of the time, the way the answer is written to this, like I'm going to spit it off to you the way that the answer is written. And it can get a little weird. A lot of answers do, right? Because sometimes the Army likes to define words using the word in the definition, which is kind of weird. But the NCO support channel is the channel of communication that reinforces the chain of command. So you can kind of think, with the earlier question about how does the chain of command support the NCO support channel, and how does the NCO, or what is the NCO support channel? These things are not mutually exclusive, right? It's not a yin and a yang. It's really 2 sides of a same coin as it relates to that authority and the responsibility. So the chain of command supports the NCOs, and the NCOs support the chain of command. That's how that works. And I know that we're plugging away at almost 20 minutes, team. So I think we'll do our deep dive into this particular training circular in a follow-on video. Definitely make sure you leave some comments down below about the questions that were asked, as well as any other regulation that we need to try to dig into. That way we can continue to keep this conversation rolling. As always, until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.